Sadhu, sadhu, sadhu. Buddha Saranai. Let me welcome on behalf of the International Dhamma Program all our Dhamma friends to the Esala Full Moon Poya Day International Dhamma Program we are having today. So I'm indeed happy that today we have with us Bhante Sujato, who will be speaking to us on Buddha's first sermon. I think all of you, Bhante Sujato has been with us on very many earlier occasions, and normally we refer not only as Bhante but also as just 1 minute, as Bhikkhu Sujato and also Ajahn Sujato. So we are very thankful because it's a little late in Sydney, Australia, but I must thank Ms. Deepika Virakon, who really arranged and discussed with us and made arrangements for the conduct of the Dhamma program. So as you all know, Bhante Sujato is the co-founder of Sutta Central. Now, this is really a reservoir of the Buddha Dhamma, where a lot of the literature is available in the English language, where the translations have been done almost according to the figures I have, over 1 million words which have been translated by Bhante Sujato. I think it is a very immense work that has been done. So I must really pay merit to Bhante for undertaking this work, and also that this is available to our Dhamma friends free of charge, so that they can enlighten and also expand the Dhamma by going into the website. So I must, as I said earlier, I must thank Ms. Deepika Virakon, because when I spoke to her, because it is normally we have at 3 o'clock, but this time I requested that whether we can have it a little late, and she kindly consented and spoke to Bhante, and I must very thankful because it's almost 10:30 p.m. there. But Bhante, we are very thankful to you for accepting our invitation. So today's is a very special day for all of us because Esala Poya is something of great significance. We earlier had the Vesak, then we had the Puson, and now, of course, the Esala, and some other key areas that are of special significance. Of course, the what Bhante Sujato will be talking on, in the where Buddha uh, arrived at the deer park in Isipatana to preach Dhamma to the 5 ascetics. The Buddha delivered the first discourse, the Dhamma Chakka Pavattana Sutra. Now, this is really the beginning of the wheel of Dhamma. So I think it's a very, very important day for us. And also, we have a very erudite Buddhist monk with us who will be able to tell us about it. Then in addition to that, of course, there are some of the other special features of the conception of Prince Siddhartha in Queen Mahamaya's womb. Then the Vash retreat. Now, this is of great significance. I am sure a lot of you who may have observed still today would have gone for the Vash retreat. In fact, I too just returned from our temple and the Vash retreat, which commences on the day following the Esala full moon Poya day. So the Katina Pinkama, of course, is celebrated much later in all temples, commencing in the month of November. Then the first ordination of a man, Prince Aritha, who entered the orders in Anuradhapura under Arahat Mahinda, that's also another special significance. And of course, the laying of foundation stone for Ruvanalisaya by King Dutugaman. So these are a few of the special maybe reasons for our celebration. But of course, the most important thing is, of course, the Buddha's first sermon. So now I'm also thankful to all our panel members and the other Dhamma friends who are present. In fact, on our panel itself, we have a lot of them who are really international, from Australia, from USA, UK. So we are very thankful to them and for accepting our invitation and coming. So may I now invite Bhante Sujato to deliver Pansil and then to commence the Dhamma program. Sadhu, sadhu, sadhu.
Sadhu, sadhu, sadhu. Thank you so much, as always, Professor Lakshman. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Buddhang saranang gacchami. Dhammang saranang gacchami. Sanghang saranang gacchami. Dutiyampi buddhang saranang gacchami. Dutiyampi dhammang saranang gacchami. Dutiyampi sanghang saranang gacchami. Tatiyampi buddhang saranang gacchami. Tatiyampi dhammang saranang gacchami. Tatiyampi sanghang saranang gacchami. Panatipata veramani sikkhapadang samadhiyami. Adinadana veramani sikkhapadang samadhiyami. Kame sumichachara veramani sikkhapadang samadhiyami. Musavada veramani sikkhapadang samadhiyami. Surameraya majjapamadatthana veramani sikkhapadang samadhiyami. Imani panchasikhapadani silena sugating yanti silena bhoga sampada. Silena nibbhuting yanti tasma silang visodhaye. Sadhu, sadhu, sadhu.
So,
All right, so thanks everybody, and I'm very honored to join with you all today to celebrate such a wonderful and inspiring and joyous occasion as the occasion of the first teaching of the Dhamma. And let us begin by just pausing for a moment, collecting our mindfulness and remembering to be present. Let us recall that when the Buddha spoke the Dhammacakkappavattana Sutta, Anya Kondanya realized the Dhamma, realized the Four Noble Truths, saw the Four Noble Truths for himself. Why did that happen? Well, partly because of the Buddha's presence, partly because of his own practice previously, Anya Kondanya's own practice previously, partly because of the clarity and the wisdom of the teaching itself. So all of these things play a role. But one of the things is the quality of attention that we bring to the teachings. And if we are paying attention to the teachings clearly, evenly, consistently, mindfully, with a sense of openness to them, then we reflect on it, remember the teachings, and then they will go to our heart and they will mean something for a long time. So for this Salha Puja period, I am teaching the Dhammacakkappavattana Sutta, various aspects of it, many times this week, and I have set myself a personal challenge to try to teach it differently each time and to look at a different aspect of the teaching with each time that I look at it. And of course, you always find that there are so many riches and so many possibilities. In fact, if you think about it, in the Dhammacakkappavattana Sutta, in the definition of the First Noble Truth, the Buddha says, Sankitena Panchupadana Kanda Dukkha. In brief, the 5 grasping aggregates are dukkha. And then if you look at the second discourse, the Anattalakkhana Sutta, what did the Anattalakkhana Sutta talk about? Well, it talks about the 5 aggregates. Rupang, Anicang, Vedana, Sanya, Sankhara, Vijnana. And so these which are only mentioned but not named, not specified, not discussed in the first sermon are then drawn out in the second sermon. So you can see here like the beginning of a process. You could even call the second sermon, the Anattalakkhana Sutta, the first commentary, where the Buddha is in fact explaining the terms that he used in the first discourse. And we could even consider the whole of the Dhamma as being a further commentary on the Dhammacakkappavattana Sutta. After all, the Buddha said that all of his teachings can be contained within the Four Noble Truths. So in a sense, that means that all of the teachings that he taught can be contained from the context of the Dhammacakkappavattana Sutta. Now, when we participate in a Buddhist tradition, we participate in the Buddhist tradition in many different ways. Through ceremonies that we do, through thoughts that we have, beliefs that we hold, through things that we read, things we practice, how we live, the precepts or life choices we make, and many other things. One of the hardest things for us is to learn how to encounter the teachings in a way that is fresh and relevant and meaningful. And I'm well aware of the fact that many of the people who are listening tonight, probably not all, but many of them, will have heard many sermons on the Four Noble Truths and the Dhammacakkappavattana Sutta. If you have not, if it's the first time that you're hearing about it, then fantastic. Yeah, we're opening up a great road for you in the future. But for many of you, you will have heard these teachings many times before. Don't let it get stale. Yeah. Don't let it get just boring. Oh, yes, another one that's like that, like that, like that. Yeah. Remember, you need to apply your mind. There is a keenness of insight that comes because it is not that we don't know these things. It is that we don't really know. We don't realize them. We don't really know them. We don't know them in the fullness and directness of our insight. There's one, I said before, that I'm going to try to draw out a different aspect of these teachings each time. So there's one little word in the Dhammacakkappavattana Sutta which I so far haven't discussed in my talks this week, and that is Ananusutta. Ananusutta. And when the Buddha is talking about the Four Noble Truths, he says, Ananusutesu dhammesu, that these Four Noble Truths are things, these dhammas, that are pubbe ananusutesu dhammesu, with regards to these things which have been not heard before from anyone else. Okay, so the word sutta, just to clarify, so that in Pali it's a little bit confusing because in Pali we have 2 words, one word sutta with 2 T's, which means a discourse. And then we have another word, sutta, with 1 T, which means something that we've heard. And it's a bit confusing because what we have heard is in the idiom of the time also refers to what we've been educated in or what we've learned, which of course is the suttas. So both sutta can mean learning of the suttas with 2 T's, but different words. Anyway, I'm just making that explanation just in case, just so we don't get ourselves tripped up on words unnecessarily. Anyway, so the Buddha has said these are things pubbe ananusutesu dhammesu. Yeah, pubbe ananusutesu dhammesu jakkhung udapadi. Vision arose. Yeah, vision arose. Pubbe ananusutesu. In a way, you can see in that phrase, the Buddha is setting up a contrast between, I guess, what is heard and what is seen. Yeah, what is seen, obviously meaning seen with the eye of wisdom, right? Not seeing with the fleshly eye, but seeing with the eye of wisdom. these Dhammas that were previously not heard from another. So what he means by that is that, of course, these are not things that he'd been taught, not things that he had studied under a previous teacher, not things that had been passed down from a tradition. As we know, shortly before this time, the Buddha had in fact, or then the Bodhisattva had spent 6 years practicing under various different teachers, and he practiced under the Brahmanical teachers who were teaching the Upanishadic philosophy, and he learnt very deep meditation under them. But their philosophy was still ultimately trapped within being, within samsara, within rebirth. And so he left those behind, even though they were very profound teachings, actually very profound and beautiful teachings, but still trapped within this idea that there is some kind of self, there's some kind of continuity to be had. And then he practiced with the Jains also for many years, or at least it doesn't actually say he practiced with Jains, but he practiced certainly practices that are basically identical to what the Jains were doing. So where either it was Jains or a very Jain-like group. And again, I think it's really important to acknowledge that the Jain philosophy is a very beautiful philosophy. And, you know, if Buddhism wasn't around, I'd probably be like, yeah, that's Jainism is pretty good. Yeah, it does sound interesting. It sounds good. And they have this beautiful philosophy of non-harming, and that idea of like not even inadvertently causing harm to any creature. I think there's something really beautiful about that. Actually, in our area here in Harris Park in Sydney, is mostly Indians around this area, and some Jains living here as well. And we have some friends around the corner who are Jains, and they come out in the afternoon and feed their rabbits and let them run around the backyard, and they sit with them and let their bunny rabbits run around the backyard because of their love for all sentient beings. It's very beautiful, and I think it's really lovely philosophy. So when the Buddha rejected these philosophies, it wasn't that they were bad philosophies or bad religions. Actually, these were the very best ones around that the Buddha went to stay with, like the very highest kinds of philosophies. And he practiced them diligently and sincerely. And he practiced them until he understood them at a very, very profound level. And only then did he say, actually, this is not what I was looking for. So I think this is a really important thing to bear in mind. So the Buddha had been through this whole kind of journey before he'd come there. And so he obviously, in that journey, had heard many teachings. In fact, he told us that he'd heard many teachings. When he practiced with Alarikalama and Udakarama, he began his account of his stays there by saying that he had memorized the scriptures that they had been teaching there. So we know that he had been learning these different teachings. And somehow those teachings were not leading him to where he needed to go. And somehow there was something missing from what was found in those teachings.
Bhante,
Actually,
excuse me, Bhante, the voice, if it can be increased a little, that would be good. If
I have my microphone up pretty much as I can go.
right. That's all right. I just thought if possible.
Sorry about that. Yeah, that's looking. There's a light thingy here, and it's going red on this end.
Now it's fine. Now it's fine.
I don't think I can take it much up.
Yeah.
There.
Now
Anyway,
it's fine.
tell me if it's distorting anyway, okay? So it's looking a bit red, so it's looking maybe going into distortion. So I'll try to not do that. Anyway, okay. So where was I? Right. So he practiced with these former teachers, and that's right. Obviously, he learned a lot of things, and of course, we know that he learned when he says this was ananusutesu pubesu pube ananusutesu dhamesu. That it doesn't mean that he never listened or learned anything under these former teachers. On the contrary, we just recited the 5 precepts, for example, and those 5 precepts are more or less shared in commons with both the Brahmanical and also the Jain traditions. A little bit different, but basically they have this similar precepts. Even in the account that the Buddha gave of his practice under Alama Kalara and Udakarama he said that he learnt faith, energy, mindfulness, samadhi, and wisdom. And as we know, these were what he later called the 5 spiritual faculties. So there were many things that he did actually learn under those teachers that he found were valuable and that he adopted or reframed into Buddhism later on. And yet when he came to talk about the Four Noble Truths, the thing that was missing from what he had heard before, he said this is something which has not been heard before from another. Now, the wording that he uses is very precise. Pubbe, formally, previously, and anusutta. And so the anusutta here is a bit unusual and has a specific meaning. So anusutta means something that has not been heard or passed down in an oral tradition. So in those days, the learning was done in an oral tradition, so that teachings could be passed down from generation to generation. So this is not something that had been passed down from generation to generation. So instead, jakung udapadi, vision arose. He saw it. And this, in just these 2 phrases, encapsulates our dilemma as students of the Buddha and as followers of the Buddha's path. Because we are actually doing that thing that the Buddha said he was not doing. He said he was not learning these things from a past tradition. We are precisely learning them from a past tradition, namely from the Buddhist tradition himself. And that means that we have a different relationship to them. He realized these things as insights that he found for himself. That was his primary realization of the Four Noble Truths. We don't realize it that way. We understand these things as teachings which somebody has told us, or something we've read in a book. We learn it as something that's passed down to somebody else's insight, which we learn about, but it's not our insight. Not yet, anyway. So that is the crucial problem, if you like, that we face as Dhamma practitioners. How do we turn this thing, which has become a tradition, which is passed down to us through the suttas, how do we turn this from something which is sutta, something which is heard or learned, into something which is jakung udapadi, into something which is a vision. Not easy, not obvious, not simple, and not something that we can just sort of formalize or make. You can't just make it happen. And one of the things that I see a lot these days in Dhamma circles and Dhamma practitioners around the place is that everybody wants to turn their teaching into like a method or a system. And I think, you see a lot of these kind of Dhamma systems, which are a bit like kind of McDonald's or something like that. Like you have like an input and an output. You sort of go in and you do these practices and then it comes out. And we're going to have a nice predictable output, like if you go to McDonald's, every bag of chips is the same, every burger is the same, and everywhere you go around the world, it's always the same output, right? Spiritual practice isn't like that. You can't just put a bunch of people into it, grind them through the system, and then spit them out at the end like a bunch of replaceable McDonald's, right? It's a journey. It's personal. It's individual. So yes, we have the guidelines of the Noble Eightfold Path, but you can see the way that the Buddha taught was that he gave us enough detail that we could know what the path was and how to practice it. But he didn't try to specify every little detail about how we're supposed to be living or, spending our day. If you look at even monastic life in the suttas, monastic life was quite open in those days. Monks would go for pindabata in the morning whenever they felt like it. And they would, do some meditation when they wanted to, and they would help each other with the chores or things they were doing in the monastery. One thing I always find remarkable about suttas is that, of course, if they were staying at something like Savatthi in the Jetavana there, then the Buddha would be there most nights teaching the Dhamma. And when we think about that, what an amazing thing. How could possibly anything be more amazing than having the opportunity to go and listen to the Buddha teaching the Dhamma? And yet, even so, often it would be the case that the monks or the nuns wouldn't even go to when the Buddha was teaching Dhamma. And you find a number of stories like this in the Vinaya and so on. And they'd be like, oh no, I'd just rather stay here and do my meditation. And so the Buddha's teaching his talks, and even then, he's not like making you do it. He's not saying this is what you have to do. He's not regulating your time, telling you, you have to meditate this number of hours. This whole concept of saying, how many hours a day should I meditate? This is don't find anything like this in the suttas. And like, oh, do I do this method or do I do that method and so on? Well, the Buddha offered a variety of methods, and all of them help us to develop our minds. But he's not like specifying every little detail that we have to do. And I find like a lot of the times that this over specification of the path is, I think it's kind of childish. I think it's treating us like we're in kindergarten or something, and we need to have every minute of our day set out for us by a teacher. And I think it's also a bit, reductive. I think often what happens is that teachers who themselves practiced a certain way then sort of make that into a program and then get everybody else to practice the same way. And actually everybody's different. So I'm not saying that you shouldn't practice in that way or whatever. I'm just saying that don't expect that if you practice in a certain school or teaching or lineage that somehow this is going to guarantee a certain outcome if you do a certain number of hours meditation or anything like that. It's okay, just do the practice and then see what happens. Spiritual practice is uncertain. So it still leaves us with this problem. How do we get from hearing the Dhamma to seeing it, from the sutta of the Dhamma to the Chakku? Well, the Dhammacakkappavattana Sutta gives us some guidance there. Of course, the main teaching there is the Noble Eightfold Path itself: right view, right intention, right speech, right action, right livelihood, right effort, right samadhi. Right effort, right mindfulness, and right samadhi. And those 8 factors are the practice which we undertake in order to realize the Four Noble Truths. But in addition to the Eightfold Path, the Buddha gives a very interesting analysis in this particular sutta of the 12 aspects of the Four Noble Truths. And that means that within each of the Four Noble Truths, there are 3, if you like, 3 phases. Buddha calls it tiparivatta, 3 phases, 3 rounds, 3 cycles of the Four Noble Truths. And the first one is simply the noble truth itself. So the suffering, the origin of suffering, the ending of suffering, and the path leading to the ending of suffering. And in the Dhammacakka, the Buddha has, of course, already explained what these 4 are. So suffering is, birth is suffering, old age is suffering, death is suffering, and so on. The origin of suffering is that craving that leads to future rebirth, yayang tanha pono bhavika, and the ending of suffering is the ending of tasayeva tanhaya sesavi raga nirodho, the ending of that very same craving. And the way to the ending of that craving is, of course, the Noble Eightfold Path itself. So the Buddha's already explained what these things are. So that's the first round of the 3 parivattas, is simply the realization of each of these things. This is suffering, that's what suffering is. This is the origin of suffering. This is the ending of suffering. And this is the path of practice leading to the ending of suffering. Now, if, as I'm sure is the case, you have all been paying attention, then you all know at least that much. Right? We know what the Four Noble Truths are. Okay, we've already explained that so far, so that should be good. At least on some level, okay? So at least at a conceptual level, we share that understanding of what the Four Noble Truths are. Now that is already pretty good. Even if you just have a shallow conceptual understanding of the Four Noble Truths, like you might learn in a classroom or something like that, obviously we're not talking about profound wisdom or deep insight or liberating understanding here. We're just talking about getting what the idea is. And if you can get what that idea is, that's already, I think, already better than I think most people in the world. I think most people in the world are lost and they don't really have an understanding of where they are, why they're here, what they're doing, or why anything is like the way it is. And from a Buddhist point of view, we can look at it, we say, oh, suffering. Ah, yeah. And when the Buddha spoke about suffering, he wanted to connect with people. He spoke about suffering, not because he was a pessimist, not because he was depressive, not because he was always on about what's bad about the world. He spoke about suffering because he looked around the world and out of his compassion, he saw that all beings are sharing this suffering. And he felt so much love and so much compassion for all beings that he wanted us to understand that this is real. It's true. Yeah. That suffering is real and that he felt it just as all of us feel it. Yeah. It's just part of humanity. And I know that it can, like, there's a strange thing about suffering, that when we feel it, it feels like our suffering. You feel so alone when you suffer. I don't know if you ever noticed that. But usually, most of the time, if you look, most people in the world, when they're happy with somebody else. Right? You go and meet your friends, you have some dinner, you have a good time, laughing. Yeah? When you laugh, you're with somebody else. If you laugh when you're by yourself, people think you're a bit strange. But if you're with other people and you laugh, you have a good time. But when you're suffering and sad, you don't want to be with other people. You want to hide. You know, I don't want to talk to anybody, just leave me alone. And you think that your suffering makes you lonely. It drives you to think, oh, I don't want to, it's too hard for me to talk to people. I don't want to bring people down. I don't want to be around people when I'm like this. And so when we feel like we're suffering or feel like we're sad, we either have to not be around people, or if we are around people, we have to try to pretend that we're not suffering. Oh, yes, I'm fine. Oh, no, there's nothing wrong. Yeah. Because otherwise it's too much. And so when the Buddha spoke about suffering, he didn't want you to be lonely. He wanted you to know, it's okay. Oh, that's that suffering. Yeah, I'm getting old too, you know. Sore back. Yeah. The Buddha had a sore back too. It's okay. Yeah, it's something that we can all share. So if we understand that reality of suffering is a profound truth about the nature of existence in any realm, whether human or any other realm, then we're not so lonely anymore. There are many people who are like us. So then the Buddha taught the origin of suffering. Now, the fact that the origin of suffering is craving is a bit challenging, because we always like to be able to blame someone for our suffering. Ideally, right? I mean, it's the government's fault, or it's our parents' fault, or it's the boss's fault, or it's the neighbor's fault, or it's the husband's fault, or the wife's fault, or it's the kid's fault, or it's whoever's fault it is. Yeah, there's always somebody to blame. America, that's a good one. You can usually blame America for anything that goes bad. So anything that goes wrong, you can find somebody to blame. Yeah. And look, of course, the reality is, of course, that it's not that those people or those things are free of blame. It's not, the Buddha wasn't saying that the people don't do any bad things or that no one's ever to blame, right? But what he did say was that look at your own heart. Look at the way that you respond to things. the way that you are is what's generating, creating suffering for yourself and for others. The suffering that you experience from others, you can't really do anything about that. I mean, you can to some extent, but you can't really fundamentally change that. That's just the reality of life. You can try your best to alleviate it, but at the end of the day, there's always going to be something. So, but what we can do is look inside our own heart. And the Buddha said in the Attadanda Sutta, a beautiful sutta about the Buddha's choice to renounce, he said he saw that craving like a dart, like an arrow in his heart. That was why he realized he'd been running around without rest, looking for safety in every place and never finding it. And this is what suffering is. So to acknowledge that we are responsible for our own suffering is a deeply mature, deeply vulnerable thing to do. It acknowledges that we have a job in front of us. If we're responsible for our suffering, then we're also responsible for alleviating that suffering, which brings us, of course, to the third noble truth of the ending of suffering. And so this is the good news, right? When we talk about external suffering, then there are many things that we can't change. Some things we can change, many things we can't change. And if we let ourselves get oppressed by those things, our lives will just end up being bitter and wasted. But the fact that the cause of suffering is inside ourselves also means that the ending of suffering is inside ourselves too. That we all have that potential to be free of that suffering. And so to realize that if we can let go of this craving, we will also let go of suffering is a profoundly empowering realization. Now, we can see this on many different levels, but you will see it importantly when you meditate. And this, I think, is a really important aspect of meditation. You are learning these Four Noble Truths every time you sit to meditate, because you will see that suffering inside you. See some maybe physical pain. It might just be an itch, something trivial. Or it might be emotional, right? Maybe anxiety or regret. Yeah? And you'll see that feeling come up. And sometimes those feelings, like depression or stress or something, sometimes those feelings can be quite long lasting. Maybe sometimes they're not, maybe sometimes it's quite fleeting. And even if those feelings are quite long lasting, it might feel like it's there for a long time. Maybe it'll even be with you for months. And every time you sit and meditate, you feel that anxiety is there. But one day you'll turn around and you'll be like, oh, hang on. It's not there anymore. What's happened? Strange, isn't it? How did that happen? I thought that was always with me, and now it's gone. And you realize that there's something in you that's let go. And you can observe this happening in your meditation. You can see your mind going out, thinking an angry or hateful thought, and then, no, let go of that thought. And you could see the mind returning to a state of peace. Yeah, that's the third noble truth. And so, of course, to develop that is not just a matter of chance, not just a matter of happenstance, but through the development of the Noble Eightfold Path, which of course impacts every aspect of our life. I already mentioned the factors of the path: right view, right intention, right speech, right action, right livelihood, right effort, right mindfulness, right samadhi. I'm going to keep on mentioning it. Make sure everybody remembers. So this practice gives us something that we can apply in spiritual practices, but also in the way that we think about the world, in the way that we speak, in how we behave, in how we make a livelihood. And so in all of these kinds of things, we can apply the Dhamma. Okay, so this is like the first of the three rounds, is the realization of each of these Four Noble Truths. Now then we're going to move to the second one of these rounds, which is the realization that there is a a duty to be done with respect to each of these Four Noble Truths. And there's a different duty for each one. So with the first one, the First Noble Truth of suffering, parinyeya, so to be fully known. With the Second Noble Truth, pahatabang, craving is to be given up. Third Noble Truth, the truth of Nibbana, is satchikatabang, to be realized. And the last one, the Noble Eightfold Path, bhavetabang, to be developed. So I'm going to talk a little bit about each one of these four functions and to look, see if we can pin down precisely what the implications are here. Okay, so the first one, so the parinyeya, the fully knowing of dukkha. Quite interesting. So the Buddha, of course, taught us the path to freedom from suffering. That's kind of the whole point of the Noble Eightfold Path, to be free of all forms of suffering. And yet, here he is at the beginning saying we have to fully know suffering. We have to experience it. The word here, parinyeya, the prefix pari has the implication of knowing something like all the way through and all the way around, thoroughly, completely, and fully knowing it. So what that means is that we don't get to like hide out and pretend that suffering isn't there. We don't get to use our path and our spiritual practice as a way of denying the reality of the suffering that we experience. And this is something that we see happens a lot in spiritual paths. And we see people who will, and I'll just give you a few examples here, people who will, for example, fixate on a guru, right? And so this kind of guru worship, which you find in many different Buddhist schools or traditions, where people, as well as other traditions, right, it's found universally, but you also find it in Buddhism, where people will fixate on some guru, some teacher, some whoever it is, and they kind of go all glassy-eyed about this teacher and how wonderful they are and all of these things, and they become so happy to be near this teacher, and it's as if whenever they're in their presence they feel like lifted out of their suffering and they feel so wonderful and all of these things. And whenever you see these kinds of things, to me these kinds of movements are always quite dangerous. And I've never personally been drawn to any of these things at all. And I've seen many cases where there have been these gurus who are very charismatic, very inspiring, and yet have been turned out to be manipulative or to have ill intentions or to be corrupt in various ways. And I'm not saying that all gurus are like that. I'm saying that if you're following somebody with the idea that just to be in their presence is going to lift you out of your suffering, then you are opening yourself up to being manipulated by somebody who does have bad intentions. If you're lucky enough to find someone who doesn't have bad intentions, then, great. But you're still not looking at your own suffering. And you're still not understanding what it is that's going on. So there's one of the terms for this is in psychology, they call this spiritual bypassing. So spiritual bypassing is a way of saying, I'm going to basically ignore my own issues. I'm going to ignore my own attachments, my own greed, hatred, and delusion. I'm not going to worry about those things. I'm going to sort of go beyond those to the next step. And we can do spiritual bypassing in many different kinds of ways. But typically it's associated with this like reluctance to engage vulnerably with one's own experience of suffering and the reasons for suffering. So the message here is that really a very simple one. It's okay. It's okay to suffer. It's okay to be sad. Feelings are all right. Feelings are fine, actually. And better to have a life that's feeling a lot of things than to have a life that's just numb and feels nothing, or to have a life that's full of false and ersatz feelings generated by drugs or gurus or whatever it is. that you think can take your suffering away. It's okay. So we be real about that suffering, and we know it all the way through. You know? And sometimes it's big, sometimes it's small, sometimes it's long-lasting, sometimes it's fleeting. It doesn't matter. Actually, it's just a feeling. And suffering is it's just how things are. It's all right. We get by. And it's amazing, you know, how you can end up living a good life and living a life that is actually full of joy and pleasure, even though we're in a world full of suffering, because we're not afraid of it. So this is what really kind of defines that problem of spiritual bypassing, really, is a fear of suffering. And if you're going to be running around driven by your fear, then you're never going to progress very far in your spiritual path. So this is that idea of parinyeya, to be fully known. Now the second noble truth, the noble truth of craving, is pahataba, to be given up. And to be given up, of course, means to give up craving, right? And funny thing about craving is that, I mean, craving is almost like the inverse of giving up, right? So we think, oh, we want to, you know, we want this, we want that, but we want to give up. We want to not want. We desire to give up desire. And so we're caught in this kind of confusion about what it is that we're doing here. When we are contemplating this and when we are working on giving up craving, the first thing to do, if you want to learn how to give up craving, do it sensibly, okay? Don't be weird about it, all right? Sometimes when people come to Buddhism, they're like, oh, well, I'm going to do this, I'm going to do that, I'm going to do this practice. Oh, I heard somebody did that practice, somebody did that practice, I'm going to do all of these things. Don't worry about it so much, yeah? It's okay, yeah? Start with those things that are causing you suffering. If you say, how do I want to give up craving? Ask yourself, well, what craving do you have that's creating suffering for you? And maybe that craving is food. Maybe that craving is sex. Maybe that craving is ambition. Maybe that craving is too many material possessions. Maybe that, who knows what that craving is, right? So, but best idea if you want to give that craving up is start with something small. Don't try to give up everything all at once. Start with something very small. Don't say, oh, I'm never going to overeat or I'm never going to do anything. No. Just start with one thing. Okay? I'm not going to eat those chips that I like to eat. Okay, fine. And that's enough. We can just give up one thing. Yeah? So what you're doing when you give up one thing is that you're starting to train your mind towards renunciation. This is one of the little tricks about the Dhamma. You see, if your mind is moving towards more desire, right, then it always amplifies that desire. If your mind is moving away from that, then it's moving away from it. And that desire is being eroded. Yeah? It doesn't matter too much whether you're doing that quickly or slowly, whether it's big things or small things. The important thing is that you have that mind of letting go. So even if, even if it's just something that's very small, maybe you're going on a journey and you look in your luggage and you say, what can I leave behind? It's just a simple thing, yeah. Maybe leave out an extra change of clothes, yeah. Or maybe, it could be so many things. Ajahn Chah gave the wonderful example where he said, if you have two apples, one's slightly larger and one slightly smaller apple, and then you have to share the two apples with a friend, then you give your friend the larger apple. Yeah, that's giving up. Yeah, it doesn't mean that you have to give your friend both apples and you don't have anything to eat, right? That's extreme practice. Yeah, you don't have to do that. It's fine to have an apple and have something to eat. But if you're the one that's slightly larger, oh, that looks a bit tastier, maybe I'll take that one for myself. No. You give that to your friend. And it doesn't matter how big that renunciation is. What matters is how consistent you are. And so if you're consistently giving and consistently sharing, then that's a huge renunciation. And I'm going to let you in on a little secret here. I believe, my own personal belief having taught meditation for a long time, is that mothers are usually better meditators. And I think this is why, because they've lived so much of their life giving for others and always thinking about other people before themselves. So those practice of thinking about others is a practice of letting go. So this is pahataba, to let go of craving. Next one is then the ending of craving, right? Third noble truth, satchikataba, to be realized. And satchikataba, in English, we usually translate this as to be realized or to be witnessed. I actually prefer the translation to be witnessed, which is a little bit more literal. In Pali, the word, it's from sa'aki, one's own eyes. So to be seen with one's own eyes. In other words, to be witnessed. And so to be seen with one's own eyes brings us back to that dichotomy that I mentioned earlier in the talk between something which is heard and something which is seen. Right? So the Buddha said that the Four Noble Truths were not something that he had heard from someone else, but something that he had seen for himself. So what he's saying here is that we also need to see it for ourselves, sa'aki, our own eyes. So it's not enough to learn all of the suttas. It's not enough to have all of the great teachers. It's not enough to practice all of the meditations or to go to all of the holy sites or to worship on all of the holy days or to do all of these things. If we want to see the Four Noble Truths, we have to see it with our own eyes. And that means development of meditation, it means the development of the five faculties, it means overcoming the five hindrances, it means being able to sustain one's awareness through mindfulness of breathing, through metta meditation, and all the other practices that the Buddha gave, which clarify our mind, remove the hindrances, and allow us to see with our own eyes. And when we do that, there is something revolutionary about it. To see the Four Noble Truths is like, the Buddha used a simile in another sutta, is like a flash of lightning in the dark of night. And suddenly you see with complete clarity everything that's around you. And in a way, we're kind of stumbling in the dark on our way to places. And we can't really, we kind of have an idea of what's there, but we're just sort of stumbling around. And like if somebody is, like if you're in the forest or something like that and it's dark and you want to find your way and somebody's calling out your name and you don't have a light or a torch or anything like that and it's just completely dark, you need to find your way and there's just somebody calling out your name and you're just trying to find your way to them. And you've got some idea of what's there and you can sort of walk carefully and gradually find your way there. But then suddenly the lights go on. Everything is illuminated and you see everything with perfect clarity. So this is what it's like to satchikatamba, to see the Four Noble Truths with your own eyes. And once you can do that, of course, even at the level of stream entry, then you will overcome some of the sanyojanas, some of the fetters, and be set on the path to full enlightenment. Then the final one of these functions, fourth noble truth, is the noble truth bhavetaba, to be developed. Bhavetaba is a causal form from the root bhu, to be, and so it means it's a that it should be made more of. Literal translation of bhavetabang would be it's to be made more of. So to be grown, to be cultivated, to be developed. Now, when we see this word bhavetaba in this way, then it tells us something profound about the nature of the teachings that the Buddha is giving. There are some religious paths or spiritual paths that seem to suggest that our spiritual practice requires some kind of intervention from some power or some force or some reality which is outside of ourselves. And that is not the way of Buddhism. So the Buddha was not a savior. The Buddha was not somebody who could lift you out of your suffering. and nor could anybody else. But inside each one of you, there lies the potential and the qualities that can lead you to liberation. And our job is to make them become more, right? To bhaveta those qualities. In other words, we all have some wisdom inside ourselves. We all have some goodness inside ourselves. We all have some of that light of insight inside ourselves. We all of us have some truth inside ourselves. We all have some mindfulness inside ourselves. We all have some peace inside ourselves. We all have some compassion inside ourselves. And it's these qualities which, through the Noble Eightfold Path, are to be made more of. Bhaveta. And this, I think, is really hopeful, because it means that this beginning of our journey does not begin by looking at a mountain in the far off distance and just imagining how we might get there. It means looking at where our feet are and imagining, how can I take the next step? That's the Noble Eightfold Path. How can I take the next step? That's the funny thing about journeys. If you want to go to the top of the Himalayas, you start by making a single step. And if you keep doing that for long enough, you're going to get there, no matter how far it is. So for us to begin the practice of the Noble Eightfold Path, if we want to say, how can we practice the Noble Eightfold Path, the simplest question we can ask is, where are these things inside me now? How can I identify these qualities inside my own heart? And when you can identify them, you think, that's good. Yeah. Just as seeing dukkha was something you can see inside you, seeing craving is something, letting go of craving is something, developing the path is something you can see inside yourself. Bhaveta, to be made more of. So these are the four functions to be exercised with regards to each one of the Four Noble Truths. Yeah? The first Noble Truth of suffering is to be fully known. The origin of suffering is to be let go of, or to be given up, and the ending of suffering is to be witnessed, or to be realized, or to be seen with one's own eyes. And the path, Noble Eightfold Path to the ending of suffering, is to be developed or cultivated or grown. And then the third one of the three cycles, so remember we have four Noble Truths, each of them has three cycles, and that makes 12 altogether. Actually, the numerology of the Dhammacakkappavattana Sutta is really fascinating. I don't know if you've ever noticed this, but all of the teachings in the Dhammacakka are numbered. We have the two extremes, and then the Four Noble Truths, and then the Eightfold Path, and then the three rounds, and the 12 factors, and everything kind of fits together in these kind of interlocking numbers. Anyway, so the third round is the round of completion. So the First Noble Truth has been fully known. The Second Noble Truth has been let go. The Third Noble Truth, Nibbana, has been seen, has been witnessed, and the Fourth Noble Truth has been developed. Now this is another this is another uplifting part of this cycle. One role that this has in this particular teaching, if you recall, of course, the first sermon was given by the Buddha to the group of 5 ascetics who initially were skeptical about the Buddha's claims of enlightenment. And so through this analysis, the Buddha is showing very clearly exactly what he meant by enlightenment. This also, I think, is another really interesting role that this part of the sutta plays, that it makes it very, very clear what it is that the Buddha is talking about when he's talking about enlightenment. So each of these four factors have to be fulfilled. So this, in a sense, is the Buddha's lion's roar of his own realization and his own attainment, but it's also a promise, because the whole sutta has started from what are those things that we share, that dukkha that we share, that path, those factors, everything is something that we can see inside ourselves. And even like when talking about the First Noble Truth, the Buddha is so intent on presenting it in a way that you can easily see, oh yes, I have it, birth, rebirth, aging, and death. Yes, I can see these things. To be separated from those you love. Ah, I know that pain. To be associated with those you dislike. Oh yeah, I know that pain. So the Buddha is doing everything that he can to show us that these are things that we can experience inside ourselves. And it's remarkable, really. Just, I mean, as a Buddhist and as a practitioner of Buddhism, we kind of forget this sometimes, right? But it's remarkable how this is 2,500 years old. And there's literally nothing about it which is even the slightest bit out of date or old-fashioned or irrelevant. I mean, it is just exactly as true and relevant and meaningful to everybody here today as it was in that time. It's astonishing, really. I mean, we just take this for granted, I think, sometimes. But it truly is astonishing. And the Buddha is giving us this promise that it is possible to understand this suffering. We don't have to be confused. We don't have to be lost in a world where suffering happens all the time and we have no idea why. Right? That sense of confusion is very distressing. Why? Why is this happening? We don't, and it is possible to let go of craving. Again, this is something which is a huge promise. Like most people go around their lives and they don't even know that it's possible to not be subject to craving. And you can see how when people are slaves to craving, like the phrase that Ratnapala used, the tanha daso, uno loco tanha daso, the world is deficient, a slave of craving. You know, this, and like if people fall into addiction or fall into these things, and their lives can be ruined because of their craving that's so excessive. And it's so hard. Maybe we think, oh, we can moderate our cravings, but to think that, oh, we can let go of it is such an astonishing thought. And the fact that the Buddha has seen this for himself, yeah, Sachi Katang, yeah. He has seen this with his own eyes. He has witnessed it. He's giving us this promise that this is a reality. And the Noble Eightfold Path, any of you who've been practicing the Eightfold Path will know that sometimes it's a struggle to keep it. It's a struggle to keep practicing loving kindness when we are around people who are very hateful. It's a struggle sometimes to tell the truth when we think maybe we'll be hurt from it. It's a struggle sometimes to keep our mindfulness when we're feeling scattered and disturbed. So to practice the Eightfold Path can be difficult and can be a struggle, but it is possible. And it is possible to reach the end of this path. So this is the promise that the Buddha is giving us through this third round. So each of these 3 rounds has a particular role to play. The first round is the establishment of what are the facts. What are we actually dealing with here? The second round is, well, what do we do about it? What is our function to fully know suffering, to give up the craving, to witness the ending of craving, and to develop the Noble Eightfold Path. And then the final round is to teach us the potential and the possibility, and for the Buddha's case, the actuality of the completion of that function. And the Buddha then went on in the Dhammacakka Sutta to reinforce the fact that he only claimed to be fully awakened when he had completed all of these 12 aspects, or the Four Noble Truths in each of the 3 aspects, totaling 12 in total. So this was one of the key teachings in the Dhammacakkappavattana Sutta that gives us a good understanding of what our path is and of how we move from something which is anusutta, something which is heard from another, to something that we can see for ourselves. And until we can do that, until we actually see that for ourselves, then we haven't really started on that path. We're still stumbling around in the dark, maybe listening to that voice, even the voice of the Buddha calling us. We know that there's something there. But until we've seen it for ourselves, a lot of what we're going to be doing is just informed informed opinion, I guess. It's not just something we're making up, and it's not just a guess. It's a well reasoned or well educated or formed opinion, but nonetheless, it's not actually the reality. So this is the Four Noble Truths in those 3 rounds. And I'm wondering, Professor Lakshman, perhaps we should go over to have some questions. Do you think that would be good?
Yeah,
Is a good
yeah,
time to do that now?
yes, that would be fine.
Do we have any
So
questions or any feedback from the panel?
yeah, we will do that. So thank you very much, Bante. I think Bante explained in great detail about the Four Noble Truths and, of course, the Eightfold Pathway. Uh, I think everything was really explained in a manner that all could understand. I was also thinking on the just a comment that I had, which I would like to find maybe some meaning from Bante. Now, the four noble truths. Now, this is something that even in management principles that we are using, because
Okay.
to identify a problem, then
Right.
the cause of it, and then, of course, the end, and of course, to have the pathway. So I was just thinking that if we are able to also maybe project in that sort of way, that it's not only the religious beliefs, but also the management principles and good governance that people are talking of would
Yes.
really come about. Any comments that Bante has on that?
Oh, definitely, and I think like even from an early days, that these were also similar to the like medical procedures, like diagnosis of an illness and treatment and so on. So yeah, it's very similar, and I think what you're seeing um, is the clarity of the Buddha in being able to see how to apply this in spiritual circles. Because like it's hard enough even in a business context, which is going to be a lot simpler, right? So in a business context, your aim is to, well, we're going to deliver this product by a certain date, and then you have a fairly straightforward path towards doing that. Relatively speaking, right? It's still complicated, but relatively it's still clear. But in the spiritual path, it's so hard to find your way. And it seems like everything's confusion, and you try this and you try that. And you just look at humanity and look at this, so many things that human beings have done to be free from suffering. The amount of gods that we've invoked to be free of suffering, the amount of practices that we've done, or herbs that we've eaten, or all of these things that we've done, and it's not clear at all what that path is. So the Buddha is presenting it in such a clear and straightforward way. And again, I think this is something that if you're used to the Theravada tradition, you probably take it for granted. Oh yes, of course, there's like the Four Noble Truths, and that's basic thing. But actually, it's not basic at all. It's actually like an incredibly insightful like penetration into the way that we are, like the way that our existence is, but in a really useful way. And I think that's what corresponds with the managerial thing, right? It's for a management point of view, it's not just enough to philosophize about how the business is or whatever, right? You don't have the luxury of doing that. You actually have to have an effective outcome that you can work towards. So in that way, I think, yeah, it is very similar.
Thank you, Bante. Uday, you have any questions or comments?
Uh, Thank you, Bante. It was very useful, very good learning experience for all of us. I just have a quick question. I think, Bante, you mentioned a good practical tip. I think I'm more looking at, hear a lot of things, but the question comes to me, how do we do that? I think Bante explained very well how to get rid of the craviness inside, desire to, the craviness. Do we have any more can you give one or two more practical tips that we can use?
Okay, well, look, all I'm going to say for this is we're now starting the RAS, starting the Rains Retreat. So for the 3 months of the Rains Retreat, the monks and nuns will be staying in one residence and keeping our practices more strictly. So if we've got to do it, then you should do it as well, out of sympathy for all the Sangha as well. So maybe for the next 3 months of the Rains Retreat, that you can all think of a practice that you can do that's going to sort of up your practice a little bit. So it might be if you don't not meditating regularly, maybe you can start a meditation practice for the rains retreat. If you are meditating, maybe you can do a bit more. Maybe you could say take 8 precepts once a week, or you could read a sutta a night, or something, right? Maybe it's cutting down on your Netflix addiction or YouTube or something like that, or whatever it might be. So you can have a think about that for yourself, but maybe just like a small practice. Better to do something small and actually achieve it, rather than saying, yes, I'm so inspired, I'm going to meditate like 6 hours a day, and then you do that for 2 days and that's great, and then it stops and you don't do anything else. Much better to meditate for 20 minutes and then to keep it going. So try to do maybe try to take up a regular practice for the rains retreat, and then see how that goes.
Thank you. Bandula, any short question or comment?
Yes, it's really good talk. The Bhante delivered it very well. And also, it's a very deep Dhamma as we heard about it. And I think I like to point out some important points that he brought out, just to reiterate. One is the thing about Anunusutesu Dhammesu Chakkung Udapati, but because often what we do is we hear, but we really don't hear also, because we hear that in a way that only we want it to hear always, whether it's Buddha Dhamma or anything else. So because of that, we really don't hear it. So I think essentially what Buddha also pointing out is that there are some things that has to be heard, which we haven't heard. That means we have to listen with an open mind. And also that statement itself leads to the whole practice, because you have to develop into an insight as well. That statement itself shows that. And the other thing is that the middle path, I think you pointed out a very important word, that is the bhavetabba. It's not just doing, but it's something that you develop.
Yeah.
So when you develop something, you always see something new. So in the case of like mindfulness, we start with the basic mindfulness, and then it has to go up to the level of enlightenment factor. So it's always renewing and developing, I think. So otherwise it becomes a Silabbata Paramasa type of a practice. I think you very importantly brought that out as well.
Thank you, Bandula.
And also one more point.
I think we have, can we take it another one, a few questions, just 1 minute. Bante, any comments on those? Any comment Bante want to make?
No, they're all great points. Yeah, thank you for that.
Right.
No comment.
Deepika, you want to make any comments or questions?
No, I'm good. No, go to the questions. I'm fine.
Right. Okay. Then shall I go to the questions? There are few questions. If I can, shall I read it, Bante, or you have it with you? Or?
Please, yeah, please read them.
Yeah, first one is, I'll read, or Bante is looking at it, or anonymous attendee. I do feel the unsatisfactoriness most times during the day through my constant mindfulness, but not clinically depressed. I find the loving kindness practice helps to go through life very satisfying. Any guidance would be greatly appreciated. Much merit to you, Bante.
Oh, well, look, thank you so much to somebody who's the person who's asking that question. I think, look, to me, I feel honestly like inspired to when I see that, because I see that you're really trying, and I feel like a sincerity in your question. And I know that sense of unsatisfactoriness and that sense of suffering, it's obviously it's hard, right? But that's why it's suffering. So, but what matters is not the suffering. What matters is how you live and how you respond to it. And I can see that you've learned to respond to that practice with loving kindness, and that is really wonderful. And I think that's just a very, very profound and meaningful thing to know, because your life, right? Life happens. It's just all these things happen. How do we respond to it? That's what makes life worth living. And so don't never feel that your responses are inadequate, or that that there's somehow that there's some kind of problem because you're not free of that suffering or whatever. It doesn't don't worry about that too much. Suffering will come, suffering will go. But how we respond to it is how we build a life of meaning and life of worthwhile. And as long as you're continuing to do that, then you're continuing on the Eightfold Path and you're coming closer to Nibbana. So I don't know if I have any extra guidance for you there. I think you're doing really well and you should keep going.
Thank you, Bhante. Next question from Ranjit Dabru. Venerable Sir, two of the most important issues Lord Buddha preached in the first sermon are the Four Noble Truths and the Eight Noble Paths. What is the difference? What is the difference between the realization of these two issues by the Lord Buddha and the understanding we human beings have, which prevents us from attaining Nibbana?
Yes, well, what is the difference? Well, we can look at what is the difference in, I guess, in, well, a number of different ways. So one of the things that make the difference is the development of the Noble Eightfold Path itself. So when we hear these things, we understand them. There are certain faculties that help us to understand, right? So maybe you have some faith, or we have some energy, we have some mindfulness that can help us develop, that can help us understand these things. So through the practice of the Noble Eightfold Path, when all of the factors of the Eightfold Path have been developed, and when they've all been fully developed to a mature level, then they're all like behind us, yeah, supporting us and enabling us, and that's what gives the insight and the clarity of mind. And so all of those different path factors contribute in some way to that clarity of mind that sees those Four Noble Truths for what they are. So this is one of the things that we can say is like a difference. So the difference is that seeing these things with all of the path factors behind us. That's like a subjective difference, I guess. But the other way that we can look at it is to say, well, the important part about the difference is, well, what is the functional difference? So the functional difference is that when the Buddha saw these things, it cut through the fetters, cut through the sanyojanas. For us, like as long as we're not enlightened, if we're on the path to enlightenment, then we can see these things, and that might help us to let go of craving, which then helps us to let go of suffering, and so that's good. But that craving will come back, right? As long as we don't have that full weight of the Eightfold Path behind us, with craving will come back. It's still incomplete. But so the really decisive difference is that the Buddha is able to cut off the fetters, and then they don't come back, which of course that's when you're really free, because for as long as we're practicing on the Eightfold Path, we're not really free, because we know that if we're not diligent and we don't keep going, we're going to get back to where we were beforehand.
Yes, there is two comments made from Anuja Vijayasekara. Excellent explanation of the 12 aspects. Much merit to you, Venerable Sir. Then another comment from Indira Fernando. What a wonderful Dhamma talk.
Thank you, Indira.
Then a question from Nilangi Kulasingha. Thank you for this wonderful Dhamma talk, Bhante. Could you please give some advice on how to let go of the craving I have towards having a fit and beautiful body? I feel very alone in my struggle to eat wholesome food on a daily basis in order to fulfill this craving. Thank you again. May you attain the bliss of Nibbana.
Thank you so much for that question, Nilangi. And yeah, really good question, and I think a really important one. Now, without knowing you or anything about your background, I can't speak too directly about your own particular issues, so I have to speak more generally about it. But one of the things that's coming across, and so because of that, I just want to preface this by saying that if the things I'm going to say now don't apply to you, that's fine. I'm just doing the best that I can, right? But one of the things that comes across in what you're saying is that there's a kind of a like a normal all of us want to be fit, all of us want to be healthy, all of those things. So that's kind of a normal thing. But I think that what's coming across to you is that you feel that that's becoming an obsession and it's becoming too much. And so the Buddha said that we should treat, and it's a bit of a challenging simile, but the Buddha said we should treat our bodies like we would treat a wound. Yeah, a bit of a challenging simile, but if you think about it, like if you cut your hand or something, right, then you look after it. You keep it clean, you put some ointment on it, you bandage it up, and you take care of it. You don't neglect it, and you're not angry to it, you don't despise it. It's just natural, but you don't get attached to it, right? It's just a wound, right? It's just a cut. So, but you look after it. Because you want to be healthy, and so the Buddha encourages us to have the same attitude towards our own bodies as well. So to eat wholesome food is great, and to be fit and to be healthy, to put some effort into those things is good. This is a wholesome attitude, but just don't go too far on it. And it sounds like maybe that you're drifting a little bit too far on it. It's okay, Nilangi. It's okay to not worry about it too much. You can eat healthy food, but just keep all things in moderation, no matter how. Yeah, and I'm sure you know this, but no matter how careful you are with what you eat and with all of those things, you're still going to get old. Your body is still going to fall apart, and you're still going to die. It's not going to stop any of those things. So you might as well enjoy yourself while you're here and have a nice life, in the meantime. So, but I would have to say also that the attitude that you're having there is better than the attitude that I've heard from some people. I remember at a dana I went to some years ago, and somebody at the dana asked me the opposite question. They said, "Oh, surely it's fine for me to be having as much junk food as I like, because it's only a body and I shouldn't be attached to it. So if I eat lots of junk food and get really unhealthy, then that should be fine." So it seemed like a bit of an excuse from somebody who liked eating junk food. So I think that eating healthy food is better, but just in moderation. It's okay.
Thank you,
Next.
Bhante. Next question is really from Nikki Petch. Many thanks for the webinar. I have been diagnosed with lung cancer 3 months ago. I am struggling. I am trying not to be scared, but it is underlying. Could you give guidance?
Oh my goodness, yeah. Look, Nikki, I'm not sure if Nikki or Nietzsche, but Nikki, so sorry to hear that, and thanks for reaching out and saying hello and that. And look, all I can say is that's one of the most shocking and devastating things that can happen. And you get that diagnosis, and then suddenly everything about your life changes. And I know that that's really terrible. And I hope that you're getting the medical treatment that you need. And I can't say anything to that. But as far as the Dhamma goes, the Buddha, of course, in the first Noble Truth, told us that sickness was inevitable and death is inevitable, and it happens to us all. The only thing that we have any choice about is how we're going to live in the meantime. And I can tell you that there are a lot of people who live long, healthy, useless lives, and they accomplish nothing and learn nothing and have no wisdom. And there are plenty of people who live short and meaningful and vibrant lives, and they learn a huge amount in there. So life is not about how many years you have, it's about how you choose to live them. And if you choose to live a good life, then you are making that good karma, which is going to be holding you in good stead for no matter what happens. So whenever you feel that fear, then that's okay. That's natural. That's actually just under the first noble truth. You know, that's just the reality. It's that suffering. So try to do our best. Make sure that the fact that you have asked that question here is a good sign, right? So to communicate it, make sure that people around you know what you're going through. It doesn't mean you have to talk about it all the time, but don't feel that you can't let people know when you're suffering. It's okay, just let people know, and just try to do your best. And if you can find a Dhamma community of people who you can spend time with, or people who can visit you, who can help, then that's really nice as well. So Nikki, I wish I could do more to help, but I just hope that you do okay. And I'm sure that your Dhamma practice will hold you in good stead, no matter what happens medically.
Thank you, Bhante. Kamal, you have any comment or questions?
Yes, actually, I want to say a few words, really, about our speaker. Much merit to you, Bhante Sujato, for your wonderful Dhamma talk. It was really, really enlightening and very simple and practical for us who are leading a busy life. And what I take home most is that you mentioned to start in a small way, not to take it full on, but take it gradually, and that's a very wise advice to us. And moreover, your support for the International Dhamma program is truly meritorious. Thank you very, very much for supporting us even in the middle of the night when we should be, it's almost 11 o'clock, I think, in Sydney. Thank you.
Midnight now.
Thank you very much. And on behalf of all in the International Dhamma program, we wish you good health and hope to have the pleasure of your company in the Dhamma program once again. Thank you. Good Sunday.
Thank you, Kamal. Sorry. Thank you, Kamal. We have Lalit Gunasingh. Actually, he's in Sydney, and I think Kadaika of Bhante. Lalit, you like to pay merit to Bhante?
Yeah, okay. Dear Bhante, on this day, such a significant day to commemorate such significant events in the life of the Buddha and in the Dhamma, we are so much grateful and appreciative of having the benefit of your profound study and the experiences to help us with our own practice. So may you be healthy and may you get all the merit and lead go towards advancing on the path to reaching enlightenment. Thank you, Bhante.
Thank you so very much, Lalit. And for those of you who aren't here in Sydney, then Lalit comes to offer Pendabata for me pretty much every week, usually, and for a long time now. So one of the most regular supporters and Dayikas here.
I think Lalit and me, we are both classmates, Bhante. We are in the same school and same class. So we have been there. Of course, Kamal also. Kamal was a little junior to us, but we have been together. So thank you very much. Deepika, you have any final comment you like to make? Because you are the one who really helped us to put all these things together and to get Bhante, despite the maybe late hours.
No, I'm fine. I'm happy listening.
Right.
No extra comments. It was very interesting as always, enlightening. I really like the way Bhante explained the Pubbē Ananussatesu Dhammesu. like we've heard it before, and how we differ from when he mentioned it to the 5 ascetics, it was different, but it's funny how we didn't see it until Bhante just mentioned it. Yeah, no, thank you for putting on these programs, Professor Vatawala, and thank you to the others as well.
Thank you, Deepika. So thank you very much, and much merit to you, Bhante. We are very thankful because especially at this late hour, which Bhante responded, and I know that it's a very special occasion, the Esala full moon Poya day, and of course the turning of the wheel of the Dhamma. I think that's the most important thing, and practicing it is something that I am sure that the large number that were present here will be able to do. So once again, let me thank Bhante and pay merit to Bhante, and invite Bhante to pay merit to the Devas and the departed. So.
Okay, very good. Thank you so very much, Professor Lakshman, to Deepika, and to all of those who've made this possible. Lakshman, I just sent you a message. I'm not sure. Do we have time to say a few words about our Perivena project? Is that something?
Yes, yes, most certainly, most certainly.
Is that something we have space for tonight? Because we
yes,
haven't
yes,
said
there is that. Yeah,
okay.
we'd like to hear that.
Okay, 1 second. Give me 1 moment.
Yeah, yeah.
Okay, so I've been a year or two ago, we were approached by the Perivena Education Unit. Deepika has been in discussion with them about helping to support English language education for monks and nuns through the Perivenas in Sri Lanka. And we decided, or there was an invitation to print sets of the Tripitaka in English for the Perivenas in Sri Lanka. And this was then reviewed by the Nikayas, who are part of the committee that's managing the Perivenas. They read through the translations and gave their approval and their support. And so we're now doing some fundraising to make it possible to make this project achieved. So what the project consists of is we want to print the English translations of the suttas and the Vinaya and distribute them to all of the Perivenas. And I'm going to put the link here. No, I'm going to put the link in the chat. Maybe Deepika, you could put the links in the chat. What do you think?
I'll do that, Bhante. You can keep explaining it. I'll do that.
Here's an example of one of the books. This is one of the 6 books in the Vinaya, and this one is, which is this? This is the second half of the Kandakas, namely the otherwise known as the Chulavagga, and this is a translation by my very dear friend Venerable Brahmali. And so Venerable Brahmali translated the Vinaya, and I translated the Suttas, and together they make up 28 volumes. So 28 books, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 28. And that's what we want to print for the Perivenas. If, of course, these translations are all available on Sutta Central, together with many other translations in Sinhala and in other languages. And if you want to order printed copies for yourself, you can also do that through the Sutta Central website, and they'll do print on demand and send to you, okay? But what we want to do is to print 1,000 sets of these books for distribution. There's 800 plus Perivenas, and then we'll have a few other places we can send it to as well. And so we're raising funds. Now, to print these will cost one set, right? So one set of 28 books will cost about $195 to print. That's 195 US, is that right?
Australian or
Australian, 195. Professor Vatawala, I have sent the link to you.
Okay.
Right,
It's 195 Australian, that's practically nothing. That's a bargain. What, 120 US or something like that? Okay, so 195, and they'll be printed through the Lake House printers in Sri Lanka. So we'll be printing them locally, and and we've been in discussions with them. They're very professional, and I'm sure they'll do a very good job. So our idea is that for us as a Buddhist community, we have all benefited so much from the Dhamma, from the Sangha, and from being able to have the Dhamma in our lives. And I think it's really important that we also be giving something back. And so for me, I feel this very much as a spiritual vocation. And part of my life is also learning through the Dhamma and finding a way to be able to give back. But also, I think it's an investment in the next generation, and it's showing a sign of faith in the Dhamma. We don't know who's going to pass through any one of those Pirivenas at any time, yeah? And maybe the next Bhante Gunaratana, or the next K. Sri Dhammananda, or the next great meditating monk or teacher is going to pass through there and is going to learn the Dhamma. And so these will hopefully be a great service for those who do want to study the Dhamma in English. Obviously, not everyone, not all the young monks or nuns are going to want to study in English, but some will. And especially there are quite a lot of overseas students in Sri Lanka in the Pirivenas, as well as young monastics who are just know English, or those who might be interested in doing missionary work overseas. And so I'm sure that there will be people who'd be interested in them. So if you're interested to help out, then as I said, one set is $195 Australian. Of course, you don't have to give that full amount. If that's too much, you can give whatever you can afford, is fine, of course. If you're interested in this project and you want to learn more about it, you can contact Professor Lakshman, and he'll put you in touch with Deepika or myself. And we are aiming to complete this project hopefully by next year and be able to distribute them through the Pirivenas. So this is a project that has come to life thanks to the great work of Deepika to pull it together, as well as our sort of central team to make it possible. And I also have to say, that I really appreciate the initiative that's taken by the Pirivena Education Unit, because I do think that it's a really positive step forward to ensure good education for the Sangha in the future.
One suggestion, Bhante, I have is that we may have to determine, because for printing purposes, what is the minimum number of copies should be printed in each, because for them to do the printing, I think they
may I answer to that question?
Yeah.
Can I answer to that? Yeah, so we are printing 1,000 sets. So all in all, it's 28,000 books. So each
I know it is 28,000, but what I'm saying is that if you wait for the whole thing to come, it will take maybe, we don't know the time how it will come. But if you know the minimum for printing, then maybe one whole set could be completed. Say if you say out of 1,000, they say 500, then maybe you can start printing those 500 and give it to the most deserving Pirivenas, which might be also where it can be worked out, or they might say 250 or 500. So maybe just to check on that and see, it will be good then. But whatever assistance required from our side, we will certainly give, because I know it's a very worthwhile cause, and I'm sure that we will be able to. In fact, now Kamal Nilavira is in the UK. He's already pledged £100. So, so Bhante, Kamal, you want to maybe say?
Excellent.
At one minute, yeah.
Sure, Deepika. If you let me know the bank details, I'll transfer that funds immediately, because
thank you. I have thanks. There is a link. You can go to Sutta Central website, and I have sent that link to Professor Vata. Well, I've sent it to panelists and hosts. It's not allowing me to. I just don't have access to just post to the audience.
I can
do that either. Yeah, I can't post to everybody.
I can't. But you should have the link. I've just sent it. So if you go there, you can make a donation. We have already raised about for about 400 sets. The aim is to complete fundraising by November. So any help, or you can share this with your friends, or in your social media, your LinkedIn, Facebook, or WhatsApp groups, and speak to your friends, and you can dedicate it in the memory of someone you'd like to remember. Or you can pick a Pirivana that you like to. When you go to donate, there is a message box. You can just mention a certain Pirivana. If you want it's your village Pirivana or something, we can sort of arrange those logistics at the time of distribution. So any help you can give is much appreciated.
I will share it with my friends.
Yes, please do. Please do come up.
Thank you. Thank you for sharing that, Bhante. It's quite important. The work we are doing is very important for the next future generations of Buddhists. Thank you. Thank you.
Sadhu, sadhu, sadhu.
Right, Bhante. So if there's anything else to be done, Bhante and Deepika, you can inform me, and we will be able to disseminate the information to all our Dhamma friends who are participating.
Yeah, we have something coming up in about 4 weeks or so. I will let you know, Professor Vatavala, and please do whatever you can.
Thank you, Deepika. Thank you.
Okay, very good. So let us finish for today by doing the dedication of merit for those of you who've joined together. And so today we have come together to celebrate Esala Puja. We have gathered together in harmony. We've taken the 5 precepts and we have listened to Dhamma and discussed Dhamma. And these are all very powerful, meritorious activities. And so from the strength of that, let us dedicate the merit for all beings. Akasatta Chubumata Devanaga Mahidika Punyang Tang Anumodantu Tirang Rakantu Sasanang Akasatta Chubumata Devanaga Mahidika Punyang Tang Anumodantu Tirang Rakantu Desanang Akasatta Chubumata Devanaga Mahidika Punyang Tang Anumodantu Tirang Rakhantu Mamparang Etavata Cham He Sambhatang Punya Sampadang Sabbe Deva Anumodantu Sabba Sampati Siddhya Sa etavata chamme hi sambhatang punya sampadang sabbe bhuta anumodantu sabba sampati siddhya etavata chamme hi sambhatang punya sampadang sabbe satta anumodantu sabba sampati siddhya Idam nyati nang hotu sukita hontu nyatayo Idam nyati nang hotu sukita hontu nyatayo Idam nyati nang hotu sukita hontu nyatayo
So Bhante, much merit to you, and I think the project that Bhante is doing is, I think, very, very important, and also something that will give the knowledge to our Buddhist priests and others who are in the Pirivanas, and I'm sure that it will be a great benefit to everyone. And maybe if we start maybe initially with the first 500, then that it will immediately help to get the other balance also. So maybe that's something that Bhante can look at. And we pay much merit to Bhante, and we pledge to support Bhante in this very worthwhile project, because Sutta Central is something that has really given the knowledge, the free knowledge that has been given to everyone, and that they will all use it for their benefit, and of course, finally, to get the full meaning of the Dhamma, and of course attain Nibbana. Sadhu, sadhu, sadhu.
Sadhu, sadhu.
So